I'm about to hit you with a shocking truth. The kinder you are, the less respect you might get. Sounds like a paradox, right? Being helpful, understanding, and respectful should naturally earn you the same in return. But sometimes the exact opposite happens. You get overlooked, taken advantage of, or even dismissed. But why? This isn't bad luck. It's a deeply ingrained psychological reality. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow explains how people unconsciously lose respect for those who don't set clear boundaries. If you've ever felt like your kindness is taken for granted, your generosity is exploited, or you're not receiving the respect you deserve, it's not just in your head. There are real reasons behind it, and today we're going to break them down. More importantly, we'll explore how to protect your dignity without compromising who you are. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to Mindful Sphere so you don't miss out on more insights like this. Now let's get into it, starting with the most eye-opening truth. Reason number 1. Unlimited kindness is seen as weakness. No matter how well-intentioned you are, people are wired to test boundaries. If you're always available, always saying yes, and constantly putting others' needs before your own, you won't be seen as valuable. You'll be seen as useful. In psychology, this is known as benevolence exploitation. When you don't set clear limits, people, often without even realizing it, start treating your kindness as something they're entitled to rather than something to be appreciated. It doesn't mean they're bad people, but the more accessible something is, the less it tends to be valued. In both social and professional settings, people naturally respect those who establish and maintain their boundaries. On the other hand, someone who is always available and never asserts their own space is often taken for granted. If you want your kindness to be truly valued, you need to learn how to set boundaries. Because your worth isn't just defined by how much you give, it's also determined by how much respect you have for yourself. Carl Jung once said, "A person who does not know their shadow can never truly be at peace with their conscience." If you're constantly sacrificing yourself for others and don't know how to say no, you're not just opening the door for people to take advantage of you. You're also disconnecting from your own inner strength. Being able to say no and creating space for yourself isn't selfish. It's what earns you real respect. Without this balance, people won't see you as a strong individual. They'll see you as someone to turn to only when they need something. So how do you make your kindness stronger and more respected? Let's move on to the next point, because the real power lies not just in being kind, but in knowing how to set limits while being kind. Reason number 2. Your kindness reflects others' insecurities. Some people struggle to accept kindness that comes with no strings attached. Why? Because in their world, everything is about calculation and self-interest. When you show genuine generosity, it forces them to confront something they'd rather ignore: their own selfishness, their unresolved fears, their inability to give without expecting something in return. Your kindness acts like a mirror, exposing the wounds they've tried to bury. That's why, instead of appreciating it, some people choose to dismiss, mock, or even resent your generosity. But here's the key. This reaction isn't about you. Your kindness isn't the problem. It's the way it challenges their worldview. If someone has spent years building an emotional wall of distrust, your sincerity shakes that foundation. To them, trusting others is a weakness, and they assume that no one can be truly selfless. So instead of questioning their own beliefs, they reject yours. Their instinct is to minimize or belittle your kindness because it makes them uncomfortable with their own limitations. Carl Jung described the shadow as the part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. For someone who has spent their life believing that trust is dangerous, your kindness brings out the very thing they've tried to suppress. But instead of facing it, they take the easier route. They dismiss you. They act distant. They make sarcastic comments. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because your presence forces them to confront something within themselves that they're not ready to face. So don't take it personally when people react negatively to your kindness. There will always be those who recognize its true value. And when you choose to live by your values rather than letting others' fears define you, that's when you truly take control. Now let's move on to the third reason, Because the way society views kindness plays a bigger role than you might think. Reason number 3, being kind challenges social norms. In today's world, toughness is often seen as a sign of strength. We live in a society that glorifies competition, where manipulation is considered a strategy for success. In this system, being kind, generous, and respectful can seem like an anomaly, because kindness means stepping away from ego battles and power struggles. It doesn't make you naive. It simply means you refuse to conform to the toxic dynamics that many people accept as normal. People are conditioned to be suspicious of anything that comes without a price. The belief that everyone has an agenda is so ingrained that encountering true generosity can be unsettling. It forces people to confront a reality they may not be ready to accept. The world doesn't have to revolve around self-interest and competition. But questioning that idea means questioning their entire belief system. And that's not easy. That's why some people ridicule, dismiss, or even reject pure kindness, because your presence alone challenges the way they live their lives. But here's the thing. People who reject kindness don't always do it out of malice. Most of the time, it's an unconscious defense mechanism. As Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. If someone defines themselves through power and self-interest, your kindness forces them to confront their own shadow, the parts of themselves they've ignored or suppressed. That's why sometimes simply being kind can feel like a subconscious threat to others. Those who react negatively to your kindness are often struggling with their own inner conflicts. But that doesn't mean you should change. Kindness isn't a weakness, it's a choice. And not everyone is ready to accept that choice. But remember this, the ones who truly change the world aren't those who fight against everything. They're the ones who offer a better alternative. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And now let's move on to the final 2 reasons, because understanding this will completely change the way you approach kindness. Reason number 4, generosity can trap you in a cycle of self-sacrifice. No matter how kind-hearted you are, constantly being the one who gives can unintentionally lock you into a role. The one who always listens, the one who's always there, the one people turn to for support. And without realizing it, others start seeing you as someone who can't step outside of that role. In their eyes, you have no needs of your own, because you've always been the one meeting everyone else's. But this isn't balance. It's a cycle that makes you invisible. The more available you are, the more people expect from you. Your time, your energy, your emotional support. It all starts feeling like an unlimited resource to them. And once that happens, your generosity stops being appreciated and instead becomes something people assume they're entitled to. You're no longer an individual, you're a support system. But here's the truth. Respect isn't just about kindness. It's about your ability to set boundaries. If you don't take care of yourself first, you can't truly be there for others. Saying "not this time" or "I need some space for myself" isn't selfish. It's self-respect. And people will only treat you the way you allow yourself to be treated. Carl Jung once said that the way people see you has more to do with their perspective than with who you actually are. If you accept the role of the always available person, others will keep you there. But true generosity isn't about exhausting yourself. It's about knowing when, how, and to whom you give. Now let's move on to the final and perhaps most important reason, because the way you manage your kindness is what truly determines how it's valued. Reason number 5, unlimited availability diminishes the value of your kindness. When something is always accessible, people stop appreciating it. And this doesn't just apply to things, it applies to people too. If you're constantly available, always ready to help, over time, people stop seeing your presence as a gift. Instead, they start treating it as a given, something they're entitled to. And that's exactly why giving too much, too often, can make your kindness invisible. But let's be clear, this isn't about becoming selfish. True generosity gains value when it's offered with intention and boundaries. If you don't manage when, where, and how you give, your kindness can start to feel like a burden rather than a choice. People stop recognizing the effort you put in, your contributions go unnoticed, and worst of all, you start feeling drained. Carl Jung spoke about the balance between light and shadow, Emphasizing that inner harmony depends on maintaining that balance. If you're always the giver, at some point, that generosity can begin to harm you. Because human nature is wired to take things for granted when they're always available. If you're always there, people stop questioning whether you should be. And in the long run, this can leave you feeling exhausted, depleted, and even resentful. The solution? Be intentional with your kindness. Giving should be valuable, not just habitual. It's not about withholding generosity. It's about choosing when, where, and to whom you give your energy. That's what makes kindness truly meaningful. What about you? Have you ever felt like your kindness was taken for granted? Have you found a way to set boundaries without losing yourself? Share your experiences in the comments. You never know whose perspective you might change. See you in the next video.